It is November 24th, 1944, at the headquarters of the 21st Bomber Command on Saipan in the Mariana Islands, where a heavy silence has descended upon the mission briefing room. Major Robert K. Morgan, the celebrated pilot of the Memphis Belle, is now commanding the dauntless Dottie and preparing for takeoff, with Brigadier General Emmett O'Donnell Jr. joining him in the co-pilot seat as mission commander. Their target is the Musashino Aircraft Engine Factory in Tokyo, a 3,000-mile round trip that will stretch their fuel reserves to the absolute limit. As 111 B-29 Superfortresses launch from runways freshly carved from Pacific coral, few realize that this single mission initiates the systematic destruction of an entire nation's ability to sustain war. The Pacific War had already demonstrated to American strategists that the Japanese home islands were not merely a final defensive stronghold, but a vast network of workshops. The prevailing theory was that if you destroyed these workshops, the imperial war machine would inevitably grind to a halt. This strategy hinged on the Boeing B-29 Superfortress program, a massive undertaking that had consumed more resources than any other weapon system in American history. At a cost of $3.7 billion, exceeding even the investment in the Manhattan Project's atomic bomb, it represented a calculated gamble that strategic bombing could bring Japan to its knees without the need for a bloody invasion. Japanese cities presented a unique set of vulnerabilities compared to the stone and concrete metropolises of Europe. Here, urban areas were constructed primarily of wood and paper, with narrow streets and densely packed buildings, creating conditions that were ripe for catastrophic fires. Moreover, industrial production was decentralized, hidden within thousands of small workshops embedded in residential districts. To strike the war factories, you had to strike the cities themselves. This reality aligned with General Henry Hap Arnold's revolutionary vision for the 20th Air Force, which, for the first time in history, operated as an independent strategic force, reporting directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The instrument of this strategy, the B-29 Superfortress, was a technological giant, stretching 99 feet from nose to tail, with a wingspan of 141 feet. Powered by 4 Wright R3350 duplex Cyclone engines, each producing 2,200 horsepower, the aircraft could lift 140,000 pounds of airframe and ordnance to altitudes exceeding 31,000 feet. With pressurized crew compartments, remotely controlled gun turrets, and an advanced central fire control system, the B-29 represented a generational leap that rendered previous bombers effectively obsolete. The campaign's trajectory changed with the arrival of Major General Curtis Emerson LeMay at the 21st Bomber Command on January 20, 1945. At 38 years old, LeMay had already earned a reputation in the European theater as the most innovative and ruthlessly competent tactical mind in American strategic bombing. His methodical precision was born of a challenging childhood in Ohio, where he worked graveyard shifts at a steel foundry to pay for his engineering degree at Ohio State University. It was this blue-collar work ethic, combined with an engineer's analytical rigor, that would soon transform the doctrine of the air war. The destructive potential of the B-29 was staggering, as each aircraft could carry 20,000 pounds of bombs. With proper organization, a fleet of 500 planes could deliver 5,000 tons of ordnance in a single mission. The primary weapon was the new M69 incendiary bomb, developed at Harvard University and tested at the WWII Proving Ground in Utah, which utilized a napalm gel designed to stick to surfaces and burn at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Colonel Thomas Power, commanding the 314th Bombardment Wing, had extensively studied Japanese construction and noted its susceptibility to fire. Traditional Japanese architecture used no nails, relying instead on interlocking wooden joints. while tatami mat floors and paper walls created structures that would ignite like kindling. A single M69 bomb could destroy a house, but thousands of them could erase an entire city. Facing this threat in 1944, Japan's air defense system consisted of approximately 375 fighter aircraft assigned to 3 air divisions. Although models like the Nakajima Ki-44 Shoki and the Kawasaki Ki-61 Hien were capable high-altitude interceptors, they struggled to reach the operational ceiling of the B-29s above 25,000 feet. Lieutenant General Masakazu Kawabe, the commander of the Air General Army responsible for defending Japanese airspace, was a veteran of campaigns in China and Burma who understood his forces were outmatched. Fuel shortages limited pilot training to mere hours per month, and as experienced aviators were lost over the Pacific, they were replaced by teenagers with minimal flight time. Ground defenses were similarly comprised of Type 88 75mm guns and Type 3 120mm guns. While they could theoretically reach 30,000 feet, their accuracy was poor and ammunition remained critically low. While Tokyo possessed the densest concentration of anti-aircraft guns in the country, its vulnerability to fire was extreme. The city's fire department operated only 280 hand pump engines and 3 aerial ladder trucks to protect a metropolitan population of 7 million. In most districts, water pressure was insufficient to fight large fires, and air raid shelters were virtually non-existent, as the government had refused to build them for fear of damaging civilian morale. The November 24th attack achieved minimal direct results, yet it revealed a critical atmospheric challenge: the jet stream. While Japanese meteorologists had observed these powerful winds before the war, Allied planners were blindsided as currents reaching 200 miles per hour pushed bombers off course and scattered their payloads across Tokyo. Only 24 of the 111 aircraft hit the primary target, and 17 were forced to ditch or land early due to fuel exhaustion. Despite these failures, Brigadier General Haywood Hansell persisted with high-altitude precision bombing through the winter. Thick cloud cover obscured the targets day after day, while the newly discovered intensity of the jet stream scattered bomb patterns across miles of empty countryside. To make matters worse, the complex R-3350 engines were plagued by mechanical failures, with engine fires frequently forcing aircraft to abort their missions. By January 1945, the 21st Bomber Command had flown 14 missions against Japan, dropping 1,385 tons of ordnance, but losing 41 B-29s in the process. At this rate of attrition, the entire force was on track to be depleted before it could inflict any significant damage on Japanese industry. General Arnold's patience had reached its breaking point. Suffering from his 4th heart attack of the war, he needed to justify the massive investment in the B-29 program before Congress could call the project into question. On January 20th, he relieved General Hansell of command and appointed Curtis LeMay with a stark ultimatum: produce immediate results or face replacement. LeMay spent 3 weeks analyzing every aspect of the operation, from weather patterns to damage assessments, and even flew combat missions in the co-pilot seat to observe crew procedures and enemy responses firsthand. His conclusion was revolutionary. Everything about American bombing tactics needed to change. On February 4th, 1945, LeMay ordered an experimental raid against Kobe, where 129 B-29s dropped a mixture of incendiaries and fragmentation bombs from high altitude. While cloud cover still limited accuracy, the results were promising. Where the incendiaries found their mark, entire city blocks were consumed by fire. A subsequent raid on Tokyo on February 25th proved even more successful, with 174 bombers destroying approximately 1 square mile of the city. Although fire was clearly succeeding where high explosives had failed, LeMay knew these results were still insufficient. The true breakthrough came from the operations analysis section, which discovered that B-29 losses were actually lower at night and at altitudes below 10,000 feet. Japanese night fighters were virtually non-existent, and their heavy anti-aircraft guns could not depress low enough to track aircraft flying near the ground. Acting on this data, LeMay made a decision that shocked his staff. The B-29s would strip all defensive armament except for the tail guns and fly individually at night between 5,000 and 9,000 feet. The weight saved by removing guns and ammunition allowed each aircraft to more than double its payload, increasing from 5,000 to 12,000 pounds. On March 9, 1945, at 17:35 local time, the first B-29 lifted off from Northfield, Guam, signaling the start of Operation Meeting House. 334 Superfortresses from the 73rd, 313th, and 314th Bombardment Wings began converging on Tokyo for the largest raid ever attempted. The target was a 3-by-4-mile rectangle in the Shitamachi district, a densely populated area housing an estimated 750,000 residents and thousands of small factories. Pathfinder aircraft arrived over the capital at 12:08 a.m. on March 10th, flying at 5,000 feet to mark the zone with M47 incendiary bombs that created a flaming X visible from 50 miles away. The main force followed, dropping their loads at calculated intervals to ensure overlapping fields of fire. The M69 incendiary bombs functioned exactly as designed. Each 500-pound cluster broke apart at 2,000 feet, scattering 38 individual bomblets across a 500-foot area. These munitions punched through tile roofs and ignited 3 seconds later, spraying napalm gel in 100-foot arcs. Within 30 minutes, hundreds of isolated fires had merged into a general conflagration, which was then transformed into a firestorm by surface winds of 45 miles per hour, generated by an approaching cold front. Temperatures at ground level exceeded 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. The superheated air created massive updrafts that tossed the heavy B-29s around like toys, forcing pilots to struggle for control, and several aircraft returned to base with their aluminum skins warped by the intense heat. By dawn on March 10th, 15.8 square miles of central Tokyo had been reduced to ashes. Conservative American estimates placed the death toll at 83,793, though Japanese sources suggest the figure may have exceeded 100,000. From April 17th to May 11th, the Superfortress fleet executed 2,114 sorties against airfields on Kyushu, a tactical diversion expressly designed to suppress kamikaze attacks threatening the invasion fleet. These missions were a source of significant frustration for General Curtis LeMay, who remained convinced that a sustained strategic bombing campaign could compel a Japanese surrender without the necessity of a ground invasion. On May 23, 1945, the strategic firebombing offensive resumed with unprecedented intensity, marking a pivotal shift in the conflict. General LeMay now commanded a formidable armada of 510 operational B-29s, organized into 5 distinct bombardment wings. The 58th Wing had been redeployed from the China-Burma-India theater, joining the newly arrived 315th Wing, which was equipped with specialized radar-capable aircraft designed for nocturnal operations. The raid on May 23rd dispatched 558 B-29s against Tokyo, the largest formation assembled to date, where Pathfinder aircraft marked aim points across the southern districts that had remained untouched by the earlier March raids. The bombers released 3,646 tons of incendiaries, creating multiple firestorms that merged into a single, devastating conflagration covering 5.3 square miles. 2 days later, May 25th, brought the campaign's climactic raid, as nearly 600 B-29s returned to the skies over Tokyo, targeting the governmental district surrounding the Imperial Palace. Although Secretary of War Henry Stimson had strictly ordered that the palace itself remain off-limits, the surrounding ministries and military headquarters were designated as legitimate targets. This operation annihilated another 16.8 square miles of the city, effectively eliminating Tokyo's capacity to function as a national capital. The sight of hundreds of superfortresses dominating the daylight sky dealt a shattering blow to Japanese morale. Pilot Sunio Hitoshi of the 244th Fighter Squadron later described the helplessness of the defenders, noting that they could only watch as their city was destroyed, comparing their interception efforts to attempting to stop a tsunami with bare hands. By late May, the 21st Bomber Command was launching raids of 500 or more aircraft every other day, and as cities like Yokohama and Kawasaki fell to the incendiary onslaught, Japanese air opposition virtually ceased, with most remaining fighters hoarded for suicide attacks against the anticipated invasion.
By August 1945, the B-29 force operating from the Marianas had expanded to over 1,000 aircraft. 66 of Japan's largest urban centers had been subjected to attack, resulting in the total destruction of 180 square miles of urban territory. Conservative estimates placed the human toll at no fewer than 330,000 dead and 500,000 injured, leaving 8.5 million people homeless. The nation's industrial capacity had completely collapsed. Aircraft manufacturing plummeted to merely 10% of 1944 levels, and oil refining ceased entirely following precision raids on storage facilities.
Furthermore, the dispersed cottage industries that produced essential components for military equipment were buried beneath the rubble of residential districts, and the psychological impact of this devastation far exceeded the physical damage. Former Prime Minister Prince Fumimaro Konoe recorded in his diary that the people were exhausted and facing starvation, acknowledging that the B-29s had accomplished what enemy armies could not. They had brought the war directly to the doorstep of every Japanese citizen. Despite the scale of the offensive, American losses remained comparatively low, totaling 414 B-29s from all causes, with approximately 2,600 airmen killed or missing. This loss rate of 1.38% per sortie was significantly lower than the 5 to 10% attrition suffered by B-17 and B-24 crews over Germany. This campaign fundamentally altered warfare doctrine. For the first time in history, strategic bombing had brought a major power to the brink of surrender without a ground invasion. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey later concluded that Japan would have surrendered by November 1945, solely due to the conventional bombing campaign and the naval blockade.
The campaign's effectiveness was rooted in multiple technological advantages. The B-29's range allowed for strikes from bases beyond enemy reach, while advanced radar capabilities enabled accurate attacks even through cloud cover. The M69 incendiary bomb proved devastatingly effective against Japanese infrastructure, and central fire control systems allowed for reduced crew sizes, thereby maximizing the number of available aircraft. The organizational structure of the 20th Air Force provided the model for the independent United States Air Force, established in 1947, proving that strategic bombing was a distinct form of warfare requiring specialized equipment, training, and command structures. By this time, training programs had produced thousands of qualified radar operators, bombardiers, and maintenance specialists. American naval and air schools were graduating new personnel at rates the Japanese facilities could not hope to match, creating cumulative advantages that only widened over time. The B-29 campaign against Japan represented the ultimate convergence of industrial might, technological innovation, and strategic adaptation. American industry produced the world's most advanced bomber, while science developed incendiary weapons perfectly suited to the target. The transformation from General Hansel's unsuccessful precision bombing to LeMay's devastating area attacks demonstrated the critical importance of tactical flexibility. Reality forced a shift from pre-war doctrines of high-altitude precision strikes to low-altitude area bombing that obliterated entire urban industrial complexes. The moral implications of these tactics would resonate for decades, with LeMay himself acknowledging that had the United States lost the war, they would likely have been prosecuted as war criminals. The deliberate targeting of civilian areas marked a departure from earlier American policy and established precedents that would influence nuclear strategy throughout the Cold War. Ultimately, the campaign validated Billy Mitchell's interwar theories regarding the decisive potential of air power, proving that wars could be won by striking directly at an enemy's industrial base and civilian morale. This reality would reshape international relations and military strategy for generations to come. Finally, on August 6, 1945, a single B-29, named the Enola Gay, dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, and 3 days later, Boxcar delivered the second atomic bomb to Nagasaki, bringing the war to its end. The specially modified silverplate B-29 variants represented the ultimate evolution of the campaign, acting as single instruments of destruction, capable of delivering a payload equivalent to that of hundreds of conventional bombers. This overwhelming projection of force contributed to the end of hostilities, culminating in Japan's formal surrender on August 15, 1945. On September 2nd, as Japanese officials affixed their signatures to the surrender documents aboard the USS Missouri, the skies above Tokyo Bay filled with a massive armada of 462 B-29s. This final exhibition of American aerial dominance formed a procession stretching for miles, casting long, ominous shadows across the waters below. General LeMay was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal for his pivotal role in forging the B-29 force into the most effective strategic bombing campaign in history. His career continued to ascend, eventually leading him to the position of Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, where he became the mastermind behind the Strategic Air Command during the Cold War era. The operational life of the Superfortress extended well beyond World War II, proving the efficacy of strategic bombardment once more during the conflict in Korea. Although the final active B-29 was withdrawn from service in 1960, its influence persisted as the insights gained from the campaign over Japan became foundational design principles for every subsequent generation of modern strategic bomber. Across the reconstructed landscapes of Tokyo, Osaka, and 64 other municipalities, concrete monuments now stand on the sites devastated by the air raids. These somber memorials serve as enduring reminders of the 10-month period when these silver giants dominated the airspace, methodically dismantling the nation's industrial and military capacity to sustain combat. The offensive against Japan provided definitive proof that conflicts could be decided through aerial supremacy alone, demonstrating that sheer industrial output could crush military opposition. It underscored a new reality of modern warfare. The technological superiority provides the critical leverage necessary for victory. Beyond merely forcing a capitulation, the B-29 Superfortress fundamentally altered the paradigm of armed conflict. Curtis LeMay's strategic pivot, shifting from ineffective high-altitude precision strikes to catastrophic low-level area bombing, illustrated that triumph relies not only on advanced machinery, but also on the flexibility to align tactical doctrine with the harsh realities of the battlefield. By the moment Emperor Hirohito announced the nation's surrender, the B-29s of the 20th Air Force had already made that conclusion inevitable.
They achieved this through a systematic application of strategic air power executed on a magnitude of destruction that the world had never witnessed before and would never see again.